Neoma didn't know the man standing in the shadows of her humiliation was the Lycan King. She didn't know he'd traveled 3 days to witness this exact moment, searching for someone with nothing left to lose. And she definitely didn't know that the worst night of her life was about to become the beginning of everything. The bonfire roared at the center of Thornwood's gathering square, casting dancing shadows across 100 watching faces. Neoma stood before them all, wearing the ceremonial white dress she'd sewn by hand, silver threads catching firelight like scattered stars. Tonight was supposed to be her claiming ceremony. Tonight, Varen would announce her as his chosen mate, his future Luna. They'd been promised to each other since childhood. Everyone knew it. Everyone expected it. So when Varen stepped onto the raised platform, his dark hair gleaming and his jaw set with determination, Neoma's heart swelled with anticipation. Then she saw who walked beside him, Lysara Ashford, daughter of the Western Ridge Alpha. Draped in silk that cost more than Neoma's family earned in a year, with rubies glittering at her throat and a smile like a cat who'd caught something helpless. The crowd murmured. Neoma's blood turned to ice. "Pack of Thornwood," Varen announced, his voice carrying across the silent square. "I've called you here tonight to present my chosen mate, my future Luna." His eyes found Neoma's. She saw it then, the apology, the guilt, the cowardice. He looked away. "Lysara Ashford has accepted my claim." The world tilted. Neoma heard gasps, whispers, someone laughing. Her mother's choked sob somewhere behind her. But all she could focus on was Varen's hand wrapped around Lysara's waist, possessive and certain, in the exact spot where he'd held Neoma just 3 nights ago when he'd whispered promises against her skin. "The Ashford Alliance will strengthen our pack," Varen continued, speaking to the crowd but addressing her, justifying, explaining, making it political when they both knew it was simply that Lysara was wealthy and Neoma was not. This decision wasn't made lightly. Wasn't it? The words escaped before Neoma could stop them. Silence crashed down. 100 heads turned toward her. Varen's expression flickered. Shame, irritation, something harder beneath. "Neoma, don't do this." "Don't do what?" Her voice cracked, but she forced herself to stand straight. She would not crumble. Not here. Not in front of everyone who'd watched her prepare for this night since she was 16. "Don't ask why you're standing with her when you were in my bed 3 days ago." More gasps. Lysara's painted smile faltered. "You're embarrassing yourself," Varen said quietly. "No." Neoma's hands trembled, but her voice steadied. "You embarrassed me. I'm just refusing to be silent about it." She turned and walked, one foot in front of the other. Past the whispers, past the pitying stares, past her mother reaching for her arm. She kept walking until the bonfire was a distant glow, and the forest swallowed her whole. Only then did she let herself break. Neoma collapsed against an ancient oak, her white dress pooling in the dirt like a surrender flag. Sobs racked her body, ugly, gasping sounds she couldn't control. 3 years of waiting, a lifetime of promises. Gone because a richer option walked through the door. She was still crying when the voice emerged from the darkness. "He's a fool." Neoma's head snapped up. A figure stood between the trees, half hidden in shadow. Tall, impossibly still. Eyes that caught the distant firelight and reflected it back like molten silver. "Who's there?" she demanded, scrambling to her feet. The stranger stepped forward, and something deep in her chest pulled tight without warning. He moved like smoke-given form, fluid, unhurried, utterly certain of his place in the world. His dark coat brushed the forest floor, and his black hair was pushed back from a face that belonged in old paintings of warrior kings. Sharp cheekbones, a jaw that could cut glass, and those eyes, pale gray, almost silver, watching her with an intensity that made her feel stripped bare. "I didn't mean to intrude," he said, His voice was low, rough-edged, like distant thunder. Though I admit I've been watching. Watching. Neoma's wolf stirred, hackles rising. She was alone in the woods with a stranger twice her size, and something about him screamed predator in a way that went beyond pack rankings. You were at the ceremony? At the edge of it. Why? He tilted his head slightly, studying her. Because I heard there was a woman in Thornwood who deserved better than what she was getting. I came to see if the rumors were true. Neoma laughed bitterly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. Well, you saw it. The pathetic she-wolf rejected for a shinier option. Show's over. That's not what I saw. Something in his tone made her pause. What did you see then? A woman who held her head high when a lesser person would have collapsed. Who spoke truth when silence would have been easier? Who walked away with dignity when she had every right to burn that platform to the ground? He stepped closer, and the moonlight finally caught his features fully. He was beautiful in the way storms were beautiful, awe-inspiring and dangerous. That's rare, Neoma. Her name in his mouth sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. How do you know my name? I know many things about you. He didn't smile, but something softened in his expression. I know your mother is sick, and the healers cost more than your family can afford. I know Varen promised you'd want for nothing as his Luna, and now that promise is ash. I know you have no dowry, no connections, and after tonight, no prospects. Each word landed like a blow. Neoma's chest tightened. If you came to mock me, I came to offer you a solution. She stared at him. What kind of solution? Marriage. The word hung in the air between them. Neoma waited for the punchline, the cruel twist, but his expression remained steady. You don't know me, she said slowly. We've never met. Why would you possibly want to marry me? I have my reasons. That's not an answer. No, he agreed. But it's all I can offer tonight. What I can tell you is this. I need a wife. Someone strong. Someone who won't crumble under pressure or be bought by the first person who waves gold in her face. His gaze held hers. Someone like you. You're insane. Possibly. He reached into his coat and withdrew a small object. A ring. Simple black iron, carved with symbols she didn't recognize. But I'm also offering you a way out. Marry me tonight, and you'll never want for anything again. Your mother's healers, your family's debts, all handled. Neoma's heart pounded. And what do you get? A wife who owes me nothing but her word. No politics, no family alliances, no ulterior motives. He turned the ring over in his fingers. Just a partnership, freely chosen. Marriages aren't freely chosen, not for people like me. Then perhaps it's time someone changed that. She should refuse. Every rational instinct screamed at her to walk away from this stranger with his impossible offer and his unreadable eyes. But then she thought about returning to the village. The whispers, the pity. Lysara's triumphant smile at every pack gathering for the rest of her life. And her mother, growing weaker every day while Neoma counted coins that would never be enough. If I say yes, she whispered, what happens then? The stranger's eyes gleamed. Then I tell you my name. Your name. Neoma let out a disbelieving breath. You want me to agree to marry you before I even know what to call you? I want you to choose me without the weight of what I am influencing your decision. That makes no sense. It will. He extended his hand, the black iron ring resting on his palm. Do we have an agreement? Neoma stared at the ring. Yeah. It was unlike anything she'd seen. No gemstones, no polish, just dark metal etched with symbols that seemed to shift in the moonlight. Something about it called to her. Something ancient. She thought about Varen's face when he chose Lysara, the dismissal in his eyes, the way he'd calculated her worth and found her lacking. She thought about her mother coughing blood into a rag this morning, insisting she was fine. She thought about spending the next 50 years watching from the edges while someone else lived the life she'd been promised. One condition, Neoma said. The stranger raised an eyebrow. If I decide this was a mistake, if you're cruel, if you lied, if any part of this is a trap, I walk away. No consequences, no retaliation. You let me go. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. Or perhaps respect. Agreed, he said. If at any point you wish to leave, I won't stop you. You have my word. Words are cheap. Mine aren't. The certainty in his voice made her pause. There was no arrogance in it, just absolute conviction. Like he'd never broken a promise in his life and didn't intend to start. Neoma reached out and took the ring. The moment her fingers closed around the iron, heat bloomed in her palm. Not painful, but intense. Like pressing her hand against sun-warmed stone. The symbols on the ring flared with pale light. What? She gasped. The ring seals the vow. The stranger's voice was calm, but his eyes tracked her reaction carefully. It's binding. Unbreakable by any force except mutual release. You could have mentioned that before I grabbed it. Would you have grabbed it if I had? Neoma glared at him, but the warmth was already fading, settling into something that pulsed gently against her skin like a second heartbeat. She slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. It's done, she said. Now tell me your name. The stranger stepped closer, close enough that she could smell pine and winter air and something deeper, wilder, like the heart of a forest no human had ever touched. My name is Calum, he said, and I am the king of the Lycan Dominion. Neoma's world stopped. Lycan, not werewolf. Lycan, the ancient bloodline, the first wolves, the ones who ruled from the northern throne and answered to no alpha, no council, no law but their own. The ones parents whispered about to frighten children into obedience. That's impossible, she breathed. The Lycan King doesn't travel to border packs. He doesn't marry common she-wolves in the forest? Calum's mouth curved slightly. Apparently, he does. He took her hand, the one wearing his ring, and lifted it to his lips. The moment his mouth brushed her knuckles, something ignited. Not just heat this time. A roaring, consuming fire that raced through her veins and crashed into her chest like a wave. Her wolf surged forward with a howl of recognition, and she felt it. A bond snapping into place, golden and fierce and utterly undeniable. Mate. Calum's eyes widened, his composure cracking for the first time. That, he said roughly, was not part of the plan. They traveled through the night. Calum's horse was a massive black stallion that moved like shadow over water. Neoma rode behind him, her arms wrapped around his waist, hyper-aware of every point of contact between them. The bond hummed beneath her skin, warm and insistent, making it impossible to forget what had happened in the forest. Mate. The Lycan King was her mate. And neither of them had expected it. Calum hadn't spoken since they'd left Thornwood behind. His body was rigid, controlled, like he was holding himself in check through sheer force of will. Neoma wanted to ask questions, dozens of them, but something told her this wasn't the time. Dawn broke as they crested a mountain ridge. Neoma forgot to breathe. The Lycan Dominion spread before her like something from a fever dream. A vast fortress carved into the mountainside, all black stone and silver spires, with waterfalls cascading down the cliffs on either side. Banners bearing a crescent moon snapped in the wind. Below the fortress, a city sprawled across the valley, larger than any settlement she'd ever seen. Welcome to Valdrin, Calum said. His first words in hours. It's... Neoma couldn't find the right word. Home. His voice was neutral. Or it will be. They descended into the city, and Neoma became acutely aware of every eye tracking their approach. People stopped in the streets. Merchants abandoned their stalls. Children were pulled behind their mothers' skirts. They weren't staring at Kalum. They were staring at her. Whispers followed like a spreading fire. Neoma caught fragments. Common blood. Border pack. What is he thinking? And forced herself to sit straighter. She'd survived public humiliation once tonight. She could survive it again. The fortress gates opened without a word from Kalum, guards snapping to attention as they passed. Inside, the corridors were vast and cold, lit by torches that burned with an unnatural silver flame. A woman waited in the entrance hall. Tall, elegant, with steel-gray hair pulled back severely and eyes that could freeze water. "Your Majesty." Her gaze slid to Neoma, and her lip curled almost imperceptibly. "I see the rumors are true." "Lady Morvain." Kalum dismounted and helped Neoma down, his hand lingering at her waist. "This is Neoma, my wife." The words sent a ripple through the gathered servants. Lady Morvain's expression didn't change, but something hardened behind her eyes. "The council will want an explanation." "The council will receive one when I choose to give it." Kalum's tone was pleasant. The warning beneath it was not. "For now, my wife needs rest. Have the Queen's chambers prepared." Queen's chambers. Neoma's head spun. 12 hours ago, she'd been a nobody in a backwater pack. Now she was standing in a fortress, wearing an iron ring, bound to a king who'd just called her his wife in front of his entire court. Lady Morvain's gaze met hers. Cold, calculating, dangerous. "Of course, Your Majesty," she said smoothly. "Welcome to Valdrin, my queen." The title dripped with venom. Neoma smiled back, showing teeth. "Thank you. I'm sure we'll become very well acquainted." Surprise flickered in the older woman's eyes, or perhaps reassessment. The first battle line had been drawn. The Queen's chambers were larger than Neoma's entire childhood home. Vaulted ceilings painted with constellations, a bed draped in midnight silk. Windows overlooking the city below, where thousands of lights flickered like earthbound stars. A copper bathtub already filled with steaming water, rose petals floating on the surface. Neoma stood in the center of it all, still wearing her ruined white dress, and felt like a fraud. A knock at the door made her jump. A young woman entered, barely older than Neoma herself, with warm brown skin and kind eyes that crinkled when she smiled. "I'm Thessaly," she said, dipping into a curtsy. "His Majesty assigned me as your personal attendant. You must be exhausted." Exhausted didn't begin to cover it, but Neoma had learned long ago not to show weakness to strangers. "I'm fine." Thessaly's smile didn't waver. "Then perhaps you'd like to be fine in the bath? The water's still warm, and I've laid out fresh clothes." An hour later, Neoma was clean, dressed in soft gray wool, and seated by the fire while Thessaly brushed her hair. The gentle rhythm was almost hypnotic. "Can I ask you something?" Neoma said. "Of course, my queen." "Why does everyone look at me like I've committed a crime?" Thessaly's hands paused briefly before resuming their steady strokes. "The court expected His Majesty to marry Lady Seren Ashford. The alliance has been negotiated for years." Neoma's blood chilled. "Ashford?" "The Western Ridge Alpha's eldest daughter. She arrived at court 2 months ago, expecting a proposal by winter's end." Thessaly met her eyes in the mirror. "Instead, His Majesty left without explanation and returned with you." "Ashford. The same family as Lysara, Varen's chosen Luna. This couldn't be coincidence." "Lady Morvain," Neoma said slowly. "Is she connected to the Ashfords?" "She's Seren's aunt, and the head of the King's Council." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Kalum hadn't just married her to escape an unwanted alliance. He'd declared war on the most powerful family in his court. And she was standing in the middle of the battlefield. "I need to speak with the king," Neoma said. She found him in his study, a massive room lined with maps and ancient texts. He stood by the window, staring out at the mountains, his shoulders carrying a weight she was only beginning to understand. "You knew," she said without preamble. "About the Ashford alliance. About Lady Morvane. You used me to escape a political marriage." Caleb turned. In the daylight he looked tired. Shadows beneath his pale gray eyes, tension carved into every line of his face. "Yes," he said simply. "I did." "And you didn't think to mention that before I put on your ring? Would it have changed your answer?" Neoma opened her mouth to say yes, then stopped. Would it have? She'd been desperate, humiliated, watching her future crumble. Would knowing she was a political pawn have mattered when the alternative was returning to Thornwood in shame? "I deserve the truth," she said instead. "All of it." Caleb was silent for a long moment. Then he gestured to a chair by the fire. "Sit. This will take some time." The story spilled out in pieces, the Ashford family's growing influence, Lady Morvane's stranglehold on the council, the pressure to marry Seren, a woman Caleb had met twice and despised instantly, and beneath it all, whispers of something darker. Council members disappearing, loyal advisors replaced, information leaking to enemies beyond the border. "Someone is moving against me," Caleb said quietly. "I don't know who. Not yet." But the Ashford alliance wasn't just about marriage. It was about control. With Seren as queen, Lady Morvane would have had access to everything. My plans, my secrets, my weaknesses. "So you married a stranger instead." "I married someone with no ties to any faction. Someone who couldn't be bought or manipulated." His eyes found hers. "Someone I could trust." "You don't know me." "I know enough." He leaned forward. "I know you could have groveled at Varen's feet and begged him to reconsider. Instead, you walked away with your head high. I know you could have refused my offer and faced whatever came. Instead, you took a risk on an unknown future." His voice softened. "That tells me more than years of courtship ever could." That invisible thread between them tightened, warm and steady. Neoma felt it reaching for him, wanting to close the distance, to touch and be touched. She stayed in her chair. "Lady Morvane will come after me," she said. "Yes." "And you'll protect me?" Something fierce flickered across his face. "With everything I have?" "Why?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "The bond was an accident. You didn't plan for a mate. Why does it matter if I survive your court politics?" Caleb stood, crossing to her chair. He knelt before her, bringing them eye to eye, and the vulnerability in his face stole her breath. "Because accident or not," he said roughly, "you're mine now, and I protect what's mine." The words should have felt possessive. Instead, they wrapped around her like armor. Before Neoma could respond, the door burst open. Thessaly stood in the doorway, face pale with terror. "Your Majesty, there's been an attack. Lord Vashon is dead, and they're saying the Queen did it." The throne room was a sea of hostile faces. Neoma stood before the assembled council, still wearing the simple gray dress, her hair still damp from the bath. Around her, nobles whispered behind gloved hands. Lady Morvane sat at the head of the council table, her expression carved from marble. Lord Vashon, a minor noble Neoma had never even met, lay dead in the eastern corridor. Poisoned, they said. And a witness had seen a woman in gray fleeing the scene. "This is absurd," Caleb growled. He stood beside Neoma, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. "My wife has been in her chambers all morning, Thessaly can confirm." "A servant's word against a nobleman's murder?" Lady Morvane's voice was ice. "Forgive me, Your Majesty, but the council requires more substantial evidence." "What evidence? A woman in gray?" Neoma stepped forward, and the whispers died. "Half the servants in this fortress wear gray. You have no weapon, no motive, and no proof of anything except that someone wants me gone. Bold words, Lady Morvain said, from a woman who appeared out of nowhere and married our king within hours. Bold accusations from a woman whose niece was supposed to be wearing this ring. The silence that followed was deafening. Lady Morvain's composure cracked, just a flash of fury before she smoothed it away. But Neoma had seen it. So had Calum. Enough! The king's voice cut through the tension like a blade. My wife is not a murderer. This investigation will be conducted properly, and until then, no one— His gaze swept the council. Will speak another word against the queen. The council dispersed in sullen silence, but Neoma caught the looks they exchanged, the subtle nods and knowing glances. This wasn't over. It was barely beginning. That evening, Calum found her on the balcony outside her chambers. Neoma stood at the railing, watching the sun sink behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. She didn't turn when he approached, but the bond told her exactly where he was, 3 feet behind her, close enough to touch, holding himself back. You handled the council well, he said. I've had practice with hostile crowds. Thornwood? Life. She finally turned. He'd changed from his formal clothes into something simpler. Dark trousers, a loose linen shirt that exposed the hollow of his throat. He looked almost approachable, almost human. I'm sorry, Calum said, for dragging you into this. I thought I could keep you separate from the politics, at least for a while. I was wrong. Would you do it differently? If you could go back? He considered the question seriously. No, but I would have warned you better. Would I have believed you? Probably not. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. You're stubborn. I prefer determined. The smile faded, replaced by something more intense. Neoma, the bond between us, I didn't expect it. I want you to know that whatever happens, I won't use it to trap you. If you want to leave, if this becomes too much, I'll find a way to release you from the marriage. Politics be damned. She studied him. This impossible man who'd offered her freedom twice now when he had every reason to hold tight, who knelt before her in his own study and called her his, who stood between her and an entire court of enemies without hesitation. What if I don't want to leave? She whispered. Calum went very still. Then I would be grateful. Just grateful? His control slipped. She saw it in the way his hands clenched at his sides, the way his breath came harder, and the way his silver eyes turned molten with restrained hunger. No, he admitted roughly, not just grateful. Neoma closed the distance between them. She'd spent her whole life waiting for Varen to claim her, waiting for her life to begin, waiting for someone to choose her. She was done waiting. She rose on her toes and kissed him. Calum made a sound like something breaking. Then his arms came around her, lifting her against him, and he kissed her back, with 3 days of restraint shattering all at once. His mouth was hot and demanding, his hands tangled in her hair, and the bond between them roared with triumph. When they finally broke apart, both gasping, his forehead pressed to hers. Stay, he breathed. Not because of the ring or the bond or the politics. Stay because you want to. Neoma touched his face, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. Ask me again when this is over, she said, when the council is handled and I'm not accused of murder and we can think clearly. And if I can't think clearly around you? She smiled. Then we'll figure it out together. He kissed her forehead, soft and reverent, and she let herself believe, just for a moment, that this impossible thing might actually work. 3 days passed in a blur of investigations and tension. Lord Vashen's murder remained unsolved, but Neoma noticed the whispers shifting. Fewer accusations, more curiosity. She'd stood her ground in the throne room, and the court was reassessing. But Lady Morvain hadn't made another move, and that worried Neoma more than open hostility. "She's planning something," Neoma said, pacing Calem's study. "She wouldn't go quiet unless she had a bigger play." Calem watched her from behind his desk, his gray gaze tracking her movements. "I have people watching her. Every meeting, every message, every visitor. And nothing unusual. She attends council sessions, takes tea with the noble ladies, and retires early." He frowned. "It's too clean." "Exactly." Neoma stopped pacing. "She framed me for murder within hours of my arrival. That's not the work of someone who waits patiently." A knock interrupted them. Thessaly entered, her face troubled. "Forgive the intrusion, your majesties, but I found something." She placed a folded parchment on the desk. "Hidden in the servants' quarters. The messenger who delivered it was paid to burn it after reading, but he got drunk and forgot." Calem unfolded the letter. The seal was unmarked, but the handwriting matched correspondence he'd seen from Morvain's private secretary. As he read, his expression hardened to stone. "What is it?" Neoma asked. He handed it to her wordlessly. The message was brief, written in coded phrases that took her a moment to decipher. But the meaning was clear enough. The wolf must fall at the winter summit. Ensure the border packs are positioned. Once the throne is empty, our candidate ascends. "The winter summit," Neoma breathed. "That's in 4 days. Every alpha in the realm will be there, including me." Calem's voice was deadly calm. "They're planning to assassinate me in front of the entire wolf nation. And blame it on the border packs." Neoma's mind raced. Civil war. The Dominion tears itself apart while Lady Morvain installs whoever she wants on the throne. Seren Ashford, most likely, with Morvain as regent. Calem stood, his chair scraping back. "I need to cancel the summit." "No." The word came out sharper than Neoma intended. "If you cancel, they'll know you're onto them. They'll disappear, regroup, and try again when you're not expecting it." "So what do you suggest? Walk into a trap?" "Spring the trap on your terms?" Neoma moved to the desk, studying the letter again. "They expect you vulnerable, unsuspecting. What if you're neither?" Calem's eyes narrowed. "You want to use the summit as bait." "I want to end this, permanently." She met his gaze. "You said someone was moving against you. Now we know who. We have 4 days to gather evidence, position allies, and catch Lady Morvain in the act." "It's too dangerous." "It's the only way." Neoma took his hand, feeling the connection flare at his touch. "You married me because you needed someone who couldn't be bought or manipulated. Trust me now." Calem was silent for a long moment. Then his fingers tightened around hers. "If anything goes wrong." "It won't." "If it does," he insisted, "you run. You don't look back. You don't try to save me. You get out, and you survive." "I'm not going to promise that." "Neoma." "No." She stepped closer, her free hand pressing against his chest, feeling his heart pound beneath her palm. "You don't get to protect me and forbid me from protecting you. That's not how this works." His composure cracked, fear, frustration, and beneath it all, a desperate tenderness that made her chest ache. "You're impossible," he murmured. "So I've been told." He pulled her into his arms, holding her like she might disappear. 4 days, he said against her hair. "We end this in 4 days." Outside the window, storm clouds gathered over the mountains. Neoma watched them roll in and felt the same tempest building in her blood. War was coming, and she intended to win. The winter summit transformed Valdrin into a sea of banners and bristling power. Alphas arrived from every corner of the realm, mountain packs and forest clans, coastal territories and desert tribes. They filled the great hall with their entourages, their suspicions, their barely concealed rivalries. And in the center of it all stood Calem, greeting each arrival with the cold courtesy of a king who trusted no one. Neoma watched from the gallery above, dressed in deep blue velvet, Caelim's colors. Thessaly had woven silver threads through her hair, and the iron ring gleamed on her finger. She looked like a queen. She felt like a target. Nervous, Thessaly whispered beside her. Terrified, Neoma admitted. But that's never stopped me before. Thessaly pressed something small and cold into Neoma's palm. A knife, barely longer than her finger. Just in case, she whispered. Neoma tucked it into her sleeve and squeezed Thessaly's hand in silent thanks. Below, she spotted Lady Morvain moving through the crowd, all gracious smiles and whispered conversations. The woman hadn't looked at Neoma once all evening. That, more than anything, confirmed they were on the right track. The plan was simple. Caelim would give his opening address at midnight, standing on the raised platform at the hall's center. According to their intelligence, that's when the assassin would strike. A poisoned blade, meant to look like an attack from the border packs. But Caelim wouldn't be alone on that platform. Neoma descended the stairs as the clock approached midnight. The crowd parted for her, some with curiosity, others with open hostility. She kept her chin high, her steps steady. She found Caelim at the base of the platform. His eyes found hers immediately, and something passed between them. Fear, trust, love. Neither had spoken aloud. Together, she said quietly. Together, he agreed. They climbed the steps side by side. The hall fell silent, hundreds of eyes fixed on the Lycan King and his unexpected queen. Caelim began to speak, his voice carrying to every corner. Words about unity, about strength, about the future of the realm. Neoma barely heard them. Her attention was fixed on the shadows at the edge of the hall, where their planted guards waited. On Lady Morvain's face, smooth and patient. On the servant moving through the crowd with a tray of goblets, angling closer to the platform with each step. Closer. Closer. The servant's hand slipped beneath the tray. Now, Neoma breathed. The hall exploded into chaos. Guards surged from the shadows, intercepting the servant before his blade could clear its hiding place. Screams erupted. Nobles scattered. And in the chaos, Lady Morvain made her move. Neoma saw it happen in fragments. Morvain's hand signal, the side door bursting open, armed men pouring into the hall wearing no colors, no insignias. Mercenaries. Dozens of them. Caelim! Neoma grabbed his arm as the first wave reached the platform. He was already moving, shoving her behind him, a blade appearing in his hand from somewhere. The first mercenary fell with his throat opened. The second crumpled with a broken neck. But more kept coming, an endless tide of steel and violence. Get her out! Caelim roared to Thessaly, who'd somehow appeared at the platform's edge. Get her to safety. I'm not leaving you. Neoma, please. A crossbow bolt sang through the air. Neoma saw it coming before Caelim did. Time slowing to a crawl as the iron tip arrowed toward his heart. She didn't think. She moved. Her body collided with his, sending them both crashing to the platform floor. The bolt whistled past, so close she felt it tug at her hair. Are you insane? Caelim's voice was ragged, his arms locked around her. Probably. She struggled upright, scanning for the shooter. There, in the gallery where she'd stood minutes ago, already reloading. We need to move. They ran. Through the chaos of the hall, past fighting guards and fleeing nobles, toward the small door behind the throne that led to the private corridors. Mercenaries tried to intercept them. Caelim cut through them like wind through wheat, his movements brutal and efficient. But there were too many. For everyone that fell, two more appeared. They burst through the door and into the corridor beyond, only to find Lady Morvain waiting. She wasn't alone. A dozen guards flanked her, and kneeling at her feet, bound and gagged, was Thessaly. Your Majesty. Morvain's smile was poison. I'd hoped you'd make it this far. Calum stepped forward, blade raised, but the guards leveled crossbows at his chest. Ah, ah, Morvain tutted. One more step and your little servant dies. Then you, then your wife. The word dripped with contempt. This is treason, Calum growled. You'll hang for this. I'll rule for this. Morvain's composure cracked, revealing the ambition beneath. 40 years I've served this throne, watched your father squander opportunities, watched you reject perfectly good alliances for sentiment. No more. She gestured, and 2 guards seized Neoma's arms. The border pacts will be blamed for tonight. You'll both die martyrs. And when the realm cries out for leadership, my niece will answer. Seren doesn't have the strength to hold the throne. Seren doesn't need strength. She has me. Neoma's mind raced. The guards holding her were focused on Calum, on the threat he posed. They'd dismissed her as helpless. A common wolf, a nobody. Their mistake. She let her body go limp, sagging in their grip. The guards adjusted their hold, leaning in to support her weight. Neoma moved. She slammed her head back into the first guard's face, feeling cartilage crunch, twisted free of the second's grip, and drove her elbow into his throat. The knife Thessaly had slipped her slid from her sleeve into her palm. Lady Morvain's eyes widened. Stop her! Too late. Neoma lunged, blade pressing against Morvain's throat before anyone could react. Call them off, she said quietly. Now. The corridor froze. Guards looked to their mistress uncertain. Calum used the hesitation to disarm the 2 nearest him, their crossbows clattering to the floor. You won't kill me, Morvain sneered, but her voice trembled. You're too soft. You framed me for murder, tried to kill my husband, threatened the only person in this castle who showed me kindness. Neoma let the blade bite deeper, a thin line of blood welling up. Tell me again how soft I am. Morvain's composure shattered. Stand down, she whispered. Stand down. The guards lowered their weapons. Calum bound Morvain's hands himself, his face carved from granite. Take her to the cells, he commanded, and find every mercenary in this castle. I want them alive if possible, dead if necessary. As the guards dragged Morvain away, Neoma's knees buckled. The knife slipped from her fingers, clattering against the stone floor. Calum caught her before she fell. You saved my life, he said, wonder in his voice. You would have done the same. That's not... He stopped, seeming to struggle for words. You could have run. When the fighting started, when Morvain had us cornered, you could have saved yourself. No. Neoma touched his face, smearing blood she hadn't realized was there. I couldn't have. Understanding dawned in his storm-colored gaze. The bond between them sang with certainty, and she knew he felt it too. The absolute knowledge that walking away had never truly been an option, for either of them. Neoma, he breathed. She kissed him before he could say more, tasting blood and ash and desperate relief. His arms crushed her against him, and she let herself fall into the embrace of a man she'd married as a stranger and chosen as a mate. Around them, the chaos slowly settled into order. Guards secured the hall, healers tended the wounded, and somewhere in the dungeons below, Lady Morvain awaited justice. But in that moment, none of it mattered. Only this, only them, only the impossible miracle of finding home in each other's arms. The aftermath took 3 days to sort through. Lady Morvain confessed under interrogation, implicating a network of conspirators that stretched across half the noble houses. Lord Vashen's true killer, one of Morvain's hired blades, admitted to the framing under questioning. Seren Ashford, confronted with evidence of her aunt's treason, collapsed into hysterical denials before being escorted back to Western Ridge in disgrace. Most delegations departed within days, their oaths renewed and their suspicions laid to rest. The border pacts, cleared of any involvement, reaffirmed their loyalty with fervent gratitude, and Neoma found herself standing before the full court as Calum addressed the realm. "This woman," he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the throne room, "saved my life, saved this kingdom. She came to us with nothing but her courage, and she gave us everything." The court that had whispered common blood now looked at her with something approaching awe. But the moment that mattered most came later that evening, when an unexpected delegation arrived at the gates. Neoma recognized the banner before she saw the faces. Thornwood, her former pack, and leading them, looking 10 years older than he had 2 weeks ago, was Varen. Calum moved to intercept, but Neoma touched his arm. "Let me," she said quietly. She met Varen in the entrance hall, acutely aware of the guards at her back, the crown's weight she now carried. "Neoma!" Varen's voice cracked. I needed to see... See what?" She kept her tone neutral. "Your rejected mate standing in the palace you'll never enter? The nobody who married the Lycan King?" He flinched. "I made a mistake." "You made a choice. There's a difference." "Lysera left me." The words tumbled out, desperate. "The moment she heard about your marriage, she broke the engagement. Said there was no point tying herself to Thornwood when the real power was here." He laughed bitterly. "She never wanted me, she wanted a stepping stone." Neoma felt nothing. No satisfaction, no vindication, no lingering hurt. Just a quiet clarity, like watching storm clouds part after a long rain. "I'm sorry that happened to you," she said, and she meant it. "But it doesn't change anything between us. If I could go back..." "You can't." She stepped closer, holding his gaze. "And even if you could, I wouldn't want you to. Because that night, when you chose her over me, you set me free. You sent me into those woods where I found something I never knew I was missing." She glanced back at Calum, who watched from the doorway with barely concealed tension. "I found my home," she said simply. "So thank you, Varen, for the best mistake you ever made." She turned and walked away without looking back. Calum met her halfway, his hand finding hers. "Are you all right?" "Better than all right." She squeezed his fingers. "I received word this morning. My mother's fever broke. The healers you sent arrived in time." Her voice softened. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." They walked together through the torch-lit corridors, and Neoma realized she wasn't pretending anymore. Wasn't playing the part of queen, of mate, of someone who belonged. She simply did. "The council meets tomorrow," Calum said. "There's still work to be done. Rebuilding trust, reforming the guard, preparing for the spring. I know. It won't be easy. Nothing worth having ever is." He stopped walking, turning to face her. "Stay," he said. "Not because of the bond or the ring or duty. Stay because you want to." Neoma smiled. "I thought you'd never ask." Spring came to Valdren like a held breath finally released. Snow melted from the mountain peaks, flowers erupted in the castle gardens, and for the first time in decades the realm breathed easy. Lady Morvaine's trial had concluded with a sentence of exile, stripped of titles, lands, and power, sent to live out her days in a remote monastery where her ambitions could harm no one. Some had called for execution. Calum had chosen mercy. "Dead martyrs are dangerous," he'd told Neoma. "Living failures are just pitiful." 3 months of peace had settled over the Dominion. 3 months of council meetings and diplomatic visits and quiet evenings by the fire. 3 months of learning each other, his habit of reading late into the night, her tendency to steal his shirts because they smelled like him. 3 months of falling deeper with every passing day. Neoma found him on the battlements, their spot now, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. "Thessaly told me you've been up here for hours," she said, joining him at the wall. "Thinking." "About?" He turned to look at her, and her heart stuttered. Even now, even after everything, the intensity in his silver eyes made her feel like the only person in the world. "About the night I found you in those woods," he said, "crying in a ruined dress, looking like you wanted to burn the world down. I was a mess. You were magnificent." He took her hands. "I told myself I needed a political solution, a wife with no connections, no complications. I told myself the bond was an accident, something to manage. And now? Now I know I was lying to myself from the moment I saw you." His voice roughened. "I love you, Neoma. Not because of the bond or fate or whatever cosmic force threw us together. I love you because you're brave and fierce and magnificently stubborn. Because you saved my life and never once let me thank you properly. Because every morning I wake up terrified you'll realize you deserve better, and every night I go to sleep grateful you haven't figured it out yet." Tears blurred her vision. "Calum, let me finish." He squeezed her hands. "I know I'm not easy. I know this life isn't what you planned. But if you'll let me, I want to spend the rest of my days proving I'm worthy of you." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a ring, not the iron band she already wore, but something new. Delicate silver twisted around a deep blue stone that caught the dying light like captured starfire. "Marry me again," he said. "Not as strangers this time, not as a political arrangement or a desperate escape. Marry me because you love me too." Neoma laughed through her tears. "You're asking me to marry you when we're already married? I'm asking you to choose me, the way I choose you, every day, for the rest of our lives." She pulled him down and kissed him, pouring everything she felt into it. The love she'd been afraid to name, the future she'd been afraid to want, the absolute certainty that this man was her home. "Yes," she whispered against his lips, 1,000 times. "Yes." The ceremony was held under the full moon, not in the throne room with its politics and pretensions, but in the castle gardens where spring flowers bloomed in riotous color. Thessaly stood beside Neoma, beaming. Calum's most trusted guards formed an honor circle, their faces soft with rare smiles. And above them, the moon hung heavy and bright, blessing their union with silver light. Neoma wore deep blue silk that made her eyes luminous, a striking contrast to Calum's silver gaze. The iron ring still circled her finger, joined now by the silver band with its captured star. When they spoke their vows, they wrote them themselves. "I came to you with nothing," Neoma said, her voice steady. "Broken and betrayed, with no reason to believe in promises. You gave me freedom when you could have demanded loyalty. You gave me choice when you could have claimed ownership. You taught me that strength isn't about never falling. It's about who reaches for you when you do." Calum's eyes glistened. "I came to you looking for a solution," he answered. "I found something I didn't know I'd lost. You stood in my court and faced down enemies without flinching. You stood between me and death without hesitation. You showed me that a kingdom means nothing without someone to share it with." His voice dropped, rough with emotion. "You are my home, Neoma. My heart. My everything." The moon blessed them as their lips met. A gentle kiss that deepened into promise, into forever, into the kind of love that songs remembered. The celebration lasted until dawn. There was music and dancing and more food than Neoma had seen in her lifetime. Warriors who'd seemed terrifying now laughed and joked, toasting their queen with genuine affection. Thessaly pulled Neoma onto the dance floor and spun her until they were both dizzy and gasping with laughter. Later, much later, Calum carried her to their chambers. "I can walk," she protested, though she made no move to escape his arms. "Humor me. It's tradition." "Whose tradition?" "Mine. Starting now." She laughed and let him carry her across the threshold into the room that had become theirs. into the life she'd built from ashes and stubbornness and one impossible night. He loved her slowly, reverently, as moonlight spilled across their bed. And she loved him back with everything she had. No more holding back, no more fear. Just two souls finally, fully choosing each other. Afterward, tangled together in silver sheets, Neoma traced the lines of his face. "Tell me something," she murmured. "Something I don't know." Caleb smiled, that rare, unguarded smile she'd learned to treasure. "That night in the woods, when I first saw you crying in that dress, I almost walked away, told myself you were too broken, too complicated, too much. What changed your mind? You looked up. And even through the tears, even through the pain, there was fire in your eyes." He kissed her softly. "I knew right then that you weren't broken at all. You were just waiting to burn." Neoma smiled against his mouth. She thought about the woman she'd been, standing in a ruined dress, watching her future crumble, believing she had nothing left. That woman hadn't known what was coming, hadn't known that rejection was just redirection, that endings were sometimes beginnings in disguise. He'd been a stranger in the shadows, offering impossible choices. Now he was her husband, her king, her home. "Fair trade," she whispered, echoing a thought she hadn't known she was holding. Caleb's arms tightened around her. "What is?" She smiled, watching dawn break over the mountains through their window. "Everything." Where are you listening from? Let me know in the comments. I love hearing from you. And if this story touched you, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people find these tales.